Hey there, I'm Laura Bennett from Austin, Texas. Picture this. For 6 years, I poured over $50,000 into my family's hands. Hard-earned money from late nights at my accounting job, money I scraped together while they never paid back a dime. When I finally found the courage to say no, they didn't just turn on me. They called me selfish, heartless, and rallied the whole family to shame me. Today, I'm pulling back the curtain on how I broke free from their financial abuse, set ironclad boundaries, and reclaimed my life. If you've ever felt trapped by family expectations, like you're carrying their weight while your own dreams slip away, this story is for you. Stick with me because this is about more than money, it's about taking back your worth. Growing up in Dallas, I was the responsible one, the daughter who had to be perfect. My parents, Linda and James, always said I didn't need the extras my sister Sophie got, because I was strong. But strong meant being their ATM, bailing them out of mortgage crises, car repairs, and Sophie's endless whims. When my grandpa Henry passed, I thought he'd seen me, the real me. He promised to take care of me in his will. Spoiler, he didn't. Everything went to my parents and Sophie. I got books and fishing gear. That betrayal cut deep, but it was the spark I needed to change everything. This isn't just my story. It's for anyone who's been used, guilt-tripped, or made to feel like family comes at the cost of your own future. If you've ever had to stand up to people you love, or felt crushed under their demands, hit that like button and share your story in the comments. Subscribe and ring the bell, because we're diving into how I said no and built a life on my terms. You can do it too. Let's walk this journey together. I'm Laura Bennett, and my story starts in Dallas, Texas, where I grew up as the eldest daughter in the Bennett family. From the time I could tie my own shoes, I was the responsible one, the kid who had to set the example. By 12, I was juggling school, chores, and looking out for my younger sister, Sophie, who's 4 years younger than me. My parents, Linda and James, had this unspoken rule. Laura's the strong one, so she doesn't need the attention Sophie craves. I'd bring home straight A's, and Mom would nod like it was expected. Sophie would scrape by with a C, and the house would light up with praise. I remember standing in our backyard, watching Sophie get hugs for a mediocre report card while my honor roll certificate sat on the counter, unnoticed. It stung, but I swallowed it, thinking that's just how family works. At 15, I started working weekends at Smokey Joe's barbecue, flipping burgers to save for college. The smell of brisket clung to my clothes, but every dollar felt like a step toward freedom. Meanwhile, Sophie spent her weekends at malls, her allowance handed to her on a silver platter. Mom would tell relatives at our annual 4th of July cookouts, "Laura's got it all figured out. Sophie needs a little more help." I'd smile through the hurt, pretending it didn't matter. But deep down I was screaming, why am I invisible? Why does my hard work count for nothing? This wasn't just about favoritism. It was about being erased in my own home. That feeling followed me like a shadow, shaping every choice I made, every sacrifice I thought I had to endure. If you've ever felt like the odd one out in your family, like your efforts were taken for granted, I see you. Stick with me because this is where the story starts to shift, where I began to question everything I'd been taught about duty and love. Let's talk about the moments that cut the deepest, the ones that made it clear I was playing a rigged game. My 16th birthday was a wake-up call. I'd been saving for a used car, working extra shifts at Smokey Joe's, dreaming of a beat-up Honda to call my own. When the day came, Mom handed me a calculator for my AP Calculus class, saying, "This'll help you stay practical, Laura." Practical. That word felt like a slap. Meanwhile, Sophie's 16th birthday, 3 years later, was a spectacle. My parents booked a weekend at a luxury hotel in San Antonio, got her a designer wardrobe and, get this, a shiny Ford Mustang, the exact car I'd saved 3 summers for. I stood in our driveway, watching her rev the engine, my stomach twisting. I wanted to be happy for her, but all I could think was, why not me? Then there was the time Sophie borrowed $500 from my college savings for Taylor Swift concert tickets. I was 17, scrimping every penny from my barbecue job. She promised to pay me back in a month, but when I asked, Mom shut me down. Don't be petty, Laura. Sophie needed a break. A break. I was working 20 hours a week while acing pre-calculus. But Sophie needed a break. That $500 never came back. And neither did my trust. At family gatherings, like our Thanksgiving potlucks at Aunt Susan's ranch, relatives would gush over Sophie's charm, her free spirit. I'd be in the corner, helping with dishes, hearing, "Laura's so responsible." It wasn't a compliment. It was a cage. My achievements were expected, while Sophie's every whim was celebrated. High school graduation was another gut punch. I was valedictorian, gave a speech to a packed auditorium. My parents clapped, but afterward, they threw a small dinner for me at home. Meatloaf, nothing fancy. Sophie's graduation. They rented a private room at a Dallas steakhouse, invited half the neighborhood, and bragged about her potential. I sat there, forcing a smile, while inside I was breaking. If you've ever poured your heart into something only to watch someone else get the spotlight, you know this pain. It's not just unfair, it's a betrayal of who you are. But those moments were building something in me, a fire that would eventually burn through the guilt and obligation. Keep watching, because this is where I started to fight back. My parents, Linda and James, were the architects of this imbalance, and that's the hardest truth to face. Mom was the vocal one, always quick to justify why Sophie got the world while I got scraps. "Laura, you're strong. You don't need the extras Sophie does," she'd say, her voice dripping with that mix of pride and dismissal. She'd parade me to relatives as the responsible one at our Sunday BBQs in Dallas, but it was never about celebrating me. It was about excusing their favoritism. Dad, a quiet civil engineer, was different. He'd slip me a $20 bill when I got into UT Austin or made the dean's list, a silent nod that felt like an apology. But he never stood up to Mom, never challenged the dynamic that left me on the sidelines. His silence was its own kind of betrayal, softer but no less heavy. I spent years trying to make sense of it. Driving home from those family gatherings, the Texas highways stretching out under the stars, I'd replay their words in my head. Why was my strength a reason to give me less? Why did Sophie's needs always trump mine? I felt like a ghost in my own family, seen only when they needed something fixed, whether it was a math problem or their latest crisis. By the time I was in my 20s, I was calling home weekly, sending gifts, showing up for holidays, hoping for a scrap of recognition. But every visit ended the same. Me driving back to Houston, my heart heavy with disappointment, promising myself I'd stop chasing their approval. The worst part, I internalized their narrative. I believed I had to be the strong one, the one who didn't need help, the one who carried the family. But that belief was a trap. It kept me tethered to their expectations, even as I built a career, moved to Houston, and started a life of my own. I was 35, successful, but still felt like that 12-year-old girl in Dallas, desperate for her parents to see her. If you've ever felt like your family only values you for what you can give them, you know this ache. It's a quiet kind of pain, one that builds over years, but it's also where my fight began. This story isn't just about their betrayal. It's about how I learned to choose myself. Stay with me, because the revenge isn't what you think, it's better. When I got into the University of Texas at Austin, I thought it was my ticket out of the shadow I'd lived in my whole life. I was 18, brimming with hope, ready to carve my own path. But even there, the weight of my family's favoritism followed me. I'd earned a partial scholarship, but it wasn't enough to cover everything. So I worked 35 hours a week at the campus bookstore, shelving textbooks until midnight, my eyes burning from studying and exhaustion. My tiny dorm room was a shrine to frugality, second-hand furniture, instant noodles, and a budget spreadsheet I updated religiously. Meanwhile, my sister Sophie, 4 years younger, started at UT Austin when I was a senior. Her experience, A different universe. My parents, Linda and James, paid her full tuition, no questions asked. She lived in the fancy Jester West dorm, with air-conditioned suites and a meal plan I could only dream of. They even gave her a monthly allowance. $800, more than I made in 2 weeks of work. I'd see Sophie on campus, laughing with friends, her new outfits gleaming under the Texas sun, while I wore the same sneakers for 3 years. One day, I asked Mom why things were so different for us. Her answer cut like a knife. "Laura, you've always been good with money. Sophie needs more support to succeed." Succeed. I was juggling a 3.8 GPA and a job while Sophie partied through a 2.5 average. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I just nodded like I always did and went back to my shift. That moment stuck with me, a bitter seed planted deep. If you've ever worked yourself to the bone while someone else coasts, you know how it feels, like you're running a race with weights strapped to your back. Those college years weren't just about getting a degree. They were about learning how unfair my family could be, how my strength was used against me. But they also taught me resilience, the kind that would fuel my fight later. Keep listening, because this is where I started to see the cracks in the life I'd been forced to accept. After graduating with a degree in accounting, I packed up my life and moved to Houston, chasing a fresh start. I landed an entry-level job at a respected firm, Nelson & Burke, crunching numbers in a cubicle under fluorescent lights. My first apartment was a shoebox in Midtown, barely enough room for a bed and a desk, but it was mine, earned with my own sweat. I'd drive down I-45, the Texas skyline fading behind me, feeling like I was finally building something for myself. But even 200 miles from Dallas, my family's expectations clung to me like humidity. I'd call home every Sunday, hoping for a connection, but Mom would talk about Sophie's latest adventure, quitting another job, chasing another dream, while my promotions got a quick, "That's nice, Laura." I'd hang up, staring at my cramped apartment, wondering why my victories felt so small in their eyes. Then I met Ethan Carter at a friend's Christmas party in Houston. He was a software engineer, with kind eyes and a laugh that made the room feel warmer. We bonded over burnt cookies and a shared love for Astros games. On our third date, over tacos at a food truck on Westheimer, I let slip a story about Sophie borrowing my laptop for an Instagram shoot and returning it with a cracked screen. My parents brushed it off, saying I could afford a new one. Ethan didn't let it slide. "Laura," he said, his voice steady, "you're allowed to be angry about how they treat you. You don't have to carry their weight." His words hit me like a lightning bolt. No one had ever given me permission to feel the hurt I'd buried for years. Ethan saw me, the real me, not the responsible daughter who fixed everything. We'd spend weekends exploring Houston, from the Buffalo Bayou trails to hole-in-the-wall barbecue joints, and he'd gently nudge me to question my family's dynamic. "Why do you keep running to their rescue?" he'd ask. I'd deflect, saying, "They're family. It's what I do." But inside I was starting to wonder. I kept up the calls, the gifts, the holiday visits to Dallas, each one ending with the same ache, disappointment mixed with a stubborn hope that they'd finally see my worth. If you've ever felt like you're pouring love into a void, you get it. Those early years in Houston, with Ethan by my side, were when I started to build a life I was proud of, even if my family couldn't see it. But the real turning point was coming, and it would shake everything I thought I knew. Ethan's words planted a seed, but it took time for me to face the truth. I was 35, a senior accountant climbing the ladder at Nelson & Burke, yet I was still chasing my parents' approval like that 12-year-old girl in Dallas. Every Sunday call, every Christmas gift I sent, every drive up I-45 to visit, it was all me hoping for a crumb of recognition. But it never came. Mom would gush about Sophie's free spirit, while my promotions got a half-hearted, "Good job, Laura." I'd drive back to Houston, the Texas night sky stretching above me, feeling like I was screaming into a void. Why was my hard work invisible? Why did Sophie's failures get more love than my successes? The truth hit me hardest after Sophie's latest stunt. She'd crashed a car, again, and Mom called asking me to cover the $3,200 repair bill. I just canceled a trip to Galveston with Ethan to save money, but I sent it anyway, believing it was my duty. When I saw Sophie post photos from a weekend in Austin, sipping cocktails at a rooftop bar, I felt sick. My sacrifice funded her fun, and my parents didn't blink. Ethan sat me down that night. "Laura, they're not just taking your money, they're taking your life. You're allowed to say no." His words broke something open in me. I started seeing the pattern. My strength, my success, was their excuse to lean on me harder. I began keeping a mental tally of every slight, every dismissal, every time I was expected to fix their messes. It wasn't just about money, it was about being valued. I'd spent years believing family meant sacrifice, but I was starting to see it for what it was: exploitation. If you've ever realized the people you love most are using you, you know this moment. It's like waking up in a storm, seeing the wreckage for the first time. This wasn't revenge yet, but it was the spark that would light the fire. Stick with me because what came next, my grandpa's will and the betrayal that followed, changed everything. This is where I learned to fight for myself, and you can too. Moving to Houston at 22 felt like freedom. I'd landed a job at Nelson & Burke, a top accounting firm, and was building a life I could call my own. My tiny midtown apartment was nothing fancy, just a bed, a desk, and a coffee maker, but it was mine, paid for with my own paycheck. I thought the distance from Dallas would give me space from my family's expectations, but I was wrong. 3 years in, the calls started. It was a Tuesday night, and I was cooking dinner, boxed mac and cheese, because that's what my budget allowed. My phone buzzed, and Mom's voice came through, laced with that familiar mix of urgency and guilt. "Laura, we're in a bind. The bank's threatening to foreclose on the house. We're 3 months behind on the mortgage. $8,500. Can you help?" My stomach dropped. That was my entire savings, money I'd scraped together for a down payment on a place of my own. But this was family. I couldn't let them lose their home. I transferred the money that night, my hands shaking as I hit send. Mom promised they'd pay me back when Dad's next project came through. "We're family, Laura," she said. "We don't need formal agreements." I believed her. I wanted to believe her. 6 months later, another call. "Property taxes are due, sweetheart. $2,500. We're just a little short." I sent it, dipping into my emergency fund. Then came the furnace repair. $1,800. Each time I told myself it was temporary, that they'd get back on their feet. But the promises to repay faded faster than Texas heat in October. I started to notice a pattern. The calls always came when I was close to a goal, a vacation with friends, a new laptop for work. My life was on hold, but I kept sending the money, because that's what the responsible daughter does. Then Sophie, my sister, joined the cycle. She was 25, drifting through jobs, always finding herself. One day, Mom called about Sophie's car. "It needs $3,200 in repairs, Laura. She can't get to work without it." I sent the money, canceling a trip to Puerto Rico I'd planned with my best friend, Stephanie. Sophie didn't even say thank you. A week later, I saw her Instagram. New boots, a night out in Austin. My money was funding her lifestyle, not her necessities. That's when it hit me. I wasn't just helping, I was being used. But I kept giving because saying no felt like betraying them. If you've ever felt like your family sees you as a wallet instead of a person, you know this trap. It's guilt, love, and obligation twisted into a knot you can't untie. But that knot was tightening, and soon I'd have to face it. Keep listening, this gets worse before it gets better. The requests never stopped. Over 6 years, I gave my family over $50,000. Money I worked 60-hour weeks to earn. Money I could have used for a house, a car, or just a moment to breathe. It wasn't just the big emergencies like the $8,500 mortgage bailout. It was the constant drip of smaller demands that bled me dry. Sophie's $2,000 apartment deposit when she moved to Austin. A $4,500 medical bill after she skipped insurance and ended up in the ER. $1,200 for job search expenses that somehow funded a weekend at a rooftop bar. Each time Mom would call, her voice heavy with that martyr tone. "Laura, we wouldn't ask if we had another choice." But they always had a choice, they just chose me to fix it. I started tracking every dollar on a spreadsheet, not because I expected repayment, but because I needed proof I wasn't imagining this. The total shocked me. $50,385, spread across dozens of emergencies. Not a single cent paid back. I'd look at that number late at night, my Houston apartment lit by the glow of my laptop, and feel a mix of anger and shame. Anger at them for taking so much. Shame at myself for letting it happen. My friends were buying homes, traveling to Europe, saving for retirement. Me. I was subsidizing my family's lifestyle while my own dreams stayed on hold. The worst was when I saw what my money bought. Christmas 2 years ago, I drove to Dallas, expecting a quiet family dinner. Instead, I walked into a living room stacked with gifts for Sophie. A new iPhone, designer bags, even a spa weekend voucher. My gift. A $20 gift card to a coffee shop, handed to me with a pat on the back. "You're so practical, Laura," Mom said. Practical. That word again. I'd given them $5,000 that year alone, and they used it to shower Sophie while I got scraps. I smiled through dinner, but inside I was breaking. I drove back to Houston, the I-45 stretching dark and endless, replaying every time I'd said yes when I wanted to scream no. If you've ever given everything to family only to feel like you're nothing to them, you know this pain. It's not just about the money, it's about what it represents. They didn't see me as Laura, the person. They saw me as Laura, the ATM. Every withdrawal chipped away at my future, my self-worth. But I kept giving because I believed family meant sacrifice. I was wrong. This story isn't just about their greed. It's about the moment I realized I deserved better. Stick with me because the man who helped me see it is up next, and he changed everything. By 35, I was a senior accountant climbing the ladder at Nelson & Burke, but my bank account told a different story. Stagnant, drained by years of bailing out my family. I'd lie awake in my Houston apartment, staring at the ceiling, wondering why I couldn't say no. Then Ethan Carter, my boyfriend, started to shift my perspective. We'd met at a Christmas party, and over time he became my anchor. He wasn't just a software engineer with a knack for fixing my Wi-Fi. He was the first person who saw through my responsible facade to the hurt underneath. One night, after a particularly rough call from Mom, she needed $2,000 for Sophie's rent emergency. I vented to Ethan over coffee at a Montrose cafe. "They're taking advantage of you, Laura," he said, his voice calm but firm. "They know you'll always say yes, so they keep asking. This isn't family, it's exploitation." Pushed back hard. "They're my parents, Ethan. Sophie's my sister. What am I supposed to do, let them sink?" He didn't flinch. "They're adults, Laura. They make choices, bad ones, and you're paying the price. You deserve a life that's yours, not theirs." His words felt like a punch, but the kind that wakes you up. I'd spent years defending my family, convincing myself that love meant fixing their messes. Ethan saw it for what it was, a one-way street where I gave and they took. He'd point out the absurdity, like when I downgraded our engagement ring to cover Sophie's medical bill. "You're sacrificing our future for their mistakes," he said. I hated hearing it, but I couldn't unhear it. I started keeping a detailed record. Not just the money, but the guilt trips, the dismissals, the way Mom would sigh. "I guess we'll figure it out," when I hesitated. One evening, after sending $1,800 for a furnace emergency that suspiciously coincided with Sophie's new wardrobe, I showed Ethan my spreadsheet. $50,385. He didn't say, "I told you so." Instead, he took my hand and said, "You're worth more than this, Laura. You don't have to be their ATM." That word, Kim, stuck. It was crude, but it was true. I was their financial lifeline, and they'd built their lives around my reliability. If you've ever been the one everyone turns to, only to realize they're draining you dry, you know this moment. It's when the fog lifts and you see the truth. Love shouldn't cost you everything. Ethan's support gave me the courage to question the dynamic I'd accepted for years. This wasn't about revenge yet, but it was the beginning of a rebellion, a quiet one brewing in my heart. Stay with me, because what came next, with my grandpa's will, would push me to the edge and force me to fight for myself like never before. My grandpa Henry was the one person in my family who made me feel seen. Growing up in Dallas, Texas, I'd spend summer afternoons with him at Lake Ray Hubbard, casting fishing lines and listening to his stories about building bridges as a young engineer. He'd keep my high school graduation photo on his fireplace mantel, right next to his old Navy medals, and tell me, "Laura, you're my pride and joy. You're gonna do big things." When I moved to Houston for my accounting job, he'd call just to chat, asking about my latest project at Nelson and Burke, never once asking for a dime. He promised he'd take care of me in his will, a safety net for the granddaughter who'd worked so hard. I held on to that promise like a lifeline, especially as I poured over $50,000 into my family's endless crises. Money for their mortgage, Sophie's car repairs, medical bills. Grandpa's words gave me hope that someone valued me, not just my bank account. Last year, when I was 35, Grandpa Henry passed away. His death hit me like a freight train. I drove up I-45 from Houston to Dallas for the funeral, my heart heavy with grief. He was gone, the one person who saw the real Laura, not just the responsible daughter. A week later, I sat in a sterile lawyer's office in downtown Dallas, expecting to hear his final wishes. My parents, Linda and James, were there, along with my sister Sophie. The lawyer, a gray-haired man with a slow drawl, read the will. Grandpa's house, worth $350,000, went to my parents. His investment portfolio, $200,000, went to Sophie. I waited, holding my breath for my name. Finally, the lawyer said, "To Laura Bennett, I leave my collection of books and fishing gear." Books and fishing gear. That was it. No money, no land. Nothing to show for the years I'd given everything to my family. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. My hands gripped the armrests, my mind racing. Grandpa had changed his will 8 months before he died, when I was buried in work in Houston. Months. I couldn't shake the feeling that my parents had something to do with it. They'd always told Grandpa Sophie needed more help than I did. Had they convinced him I didn't need anything? The betrayal cut deeper than anything I'd felt before. I'd given my family $50,385 over 6 years, money I'd earned through late nights and skipped vacations. And now, the one person I thought saw my worth had left me nothing. If you've ever trusted someone to have your back, only to find out they didn't, you know this pain. It's not just loss, it's a knife in the heart. But this was the moment that broke me open, the spark that would change everything. Stay with me, because what I did next was a turning point. I couldn't let it go. The day after the lawyer's office, I drove to my parents' house in Dallas, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. I needed answers. Why had Grandpa Henry left me out? Why did my family keep taking while giving me nothing in return? The house looked the same as always. Red brick, neatly trimmed lawn, the place I'd grown up feeling invisible. Mom, Dad, and Sophie were in the living room, sipping coffee like nothing had happened. I stood in the doorway, my voice low but steady. "I need to talk about Grandpa's will," I said. Mom's face tightened, but she gestured for me to sit. I couldn't. I needed to stand tall for this. Why did Grandpa change his will? Yes. He promised he'd take care of me. I gave you $50,000 over the years. Money for your mortgage, Sophie's bills, everything. And now I get fishing gear. What happened? Dad looked at the floor. His usual silence deafening. Mom sighed, that martyr sigh I knew too well. Laura, you're strong. You've always been fine. Sophie needed the money more. She's still finding her way. Sophie, sitting on the couch, rolled her eyes. You're being dramatic, Laura. You're doing great in Houston. Why do you even care? Her words lit a fire in me. Why do I care? I said, my voice rising. Because I've given everything to this family. I've put my life on hold to keep you afloat. What about my future? What about me? That's when the truth came out. Dad admitted they'd talked to Grandpa before he changed the will. We told him Sophie was struggling, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. We thought you'd understand, Laura. You always do. Understand. I felt like I'd been punched. They'd manipulated Grandpa, used his love for Sophie to cut me out. Turned to Sophie. You got $200,000, and you're calling me dramatic? I paid for your car, your rent, your mistakes. And you sit here acting like I'm greedy. She stood up, glaring. You're just jealous, Laura. You've always been jealous of me. That was the moment I saw them clearly, not as family, but as people who'd built their lives on my sacrifices. I walked out, my heart pounding. Driving back to Houston, I stopped at a gas station in Corsicana, staring at the Texas sunset. I realized I'd been fighting for their love my whole life, but it was a losing battle. If you've ever stood up to your family, knowing it might cost you everything, you know this moment. It's terrifying, but it's also freeing. This wasn't revenge yet, but it was the end of me playing their game. The real fight was coming, and I was ready. A few days after the confrontation, I was back in Houston, trying to process the betrayal. I thought the worst was over, but Sophie had other plans. I got a text from my cousin Ryan, a screenshot attached. It was Sophie's Instagram post. A video from a beach resort in Cancun. Her hair blowing in the breeze, a cocktail in hand. She was laughing, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Don't worry about money, y'all, she said to the camera. I've got Mom, Dad, and Laura, my personal ATM, covering me. Right, sis. The caption read, living my best life, no thanks to haters. My blood ran cold. She'd tagged me, knowing I'd see it, knowing it would hurt. That word, felt like a slap, especially after I'd given her $50,385 over the years, money that clearly funded this trip. The post blew up. Family members commented, some laughing, others scolding me for causing drama. Aunt Susan, my mom's sister, messaged me. Laura, you're being too sensitive. Sophie's just joking. Joking. I'd given up my savings, my dreams, to keep them afloat, and this was my reward. Public humiliation. I saved the video not for revenge, but as a reminder of who they really were. I couldn't unsee it. Sophie wasn't just ungrateful. She was gleeful about using me. And my parents, they didn't call to apologize. They didn't tell her to take it down. Their silence said everything. I showed the video to Ethan, my boyfriend, at our favorite Houston cafe. He was furious. Laura, this isn't a joke. They're mocking you for your kindness. You don't owe them anything. Not money, not loyalty. His words echoed what I'd been too afraid to admit. I'd spent years believing family meant sacrifice, but this wasn't family. This was exploitation, dressed up with smiles and guilt trips. I started replaying every moment. The mortgage payments, the medical bills, the $3,200 car repair I'd covered while Sophie partied. And now, she was flaunting my money in Cancun, calling me an ATM for the world to see. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you love, then mocked for your pain, you know this feeling. It's like standing in a storm, watching everything you've built wash away. But in that storm I found clarity. Sophie's video wasn't just cruel, it was my breaking point. I wasn't going to be their ATM anymore. This story is about revenge, but not the kind you might expect. It's about reclaiming my life, my worth, my future. Stay with me because what I did next, drawing the line and walking away, was the hardest, most liberating thing I've ever done. You can do it too. Sophie's Instagram video from Cancun, laughing and calling me the family ATM, was the final straw. 4 years, I'd given my family over $50,000. Money for their mortgage, Sophie's car repairs, medical bills, while they left me out of Grandpa Henry's will and mocked my sacrifices. I was 35, a senior accountant in Houston, but I felt like that 12-year-old girl in Dallas, desperate for my family's love. Enough was enough. I sat in my midtown apartment, the city's hum outside my window, and realized I had to stop being their lifeline. But saying no to family isn't easy. It's like cutting a piece of your heart out. I needed help to do it right. I turned to Ethan, my boyfriend, and Dr. Emily Carter, my therapist. Over coffee at a Montrose cafe, Ethan held my hand as I poured out my anger and guilt. "Laura, you're not abandoning them," he said. "You're choosing yourself. They've taken enough." Dr. Carter, in our next session, walked me through the guilt. "You've been conditioned to feel responsible for their choices," she said. "Setting boundaries is about reclaiming your power." Their words gave me courage. I spent a weekend drafting an email, my laptop glowing in the dark. It read, "Dear Mom, Dad, Sophie, I've supported you financially for years, but I can't anymore. This decision is final. I need to focus on my own life. I hope you respect my choice." Every word felt like a brick in a wall I was building to protect myself. But hitting send, that was another battle. I sat there, cursor hovering, my heart racing. What if they hated me? What if they called me selfish like Sophie did online? Then I thought of Grandpa's will. $550,000 split between them, while I got fishing gear. I thought of the $50,385 I'd given, never repaid. I thought of my dreams, owning a home, starting a business, put on hold for their crises. I pressed send and exhaled. To protect my peace, I blocked their numbers for 48 hours. It felt drastic, but I needed space to stand firm. If you've ever had to draw a line with people you love, you know this fear, the fear of losing them, but also the freedom of choosing yourself. This wasn't revenge yet, but it was the start of something bigger. Keep listening because what happened next tested everything. A week after the email, I got a call from Aunt Susan, my mom's sister. "Laura, we're having a family meeting in Dallas this weekend," she said. "Everyone's worried about you." Worried? I knew better. This wasn't concern, it was an ambush. But I drove up I-45 from Houston, my stomach in knots, ready to face them. I'd spent years giving in to their demands, but this time I wasn't backing down. Pulling into my parents' driveway, the red brick house looked smaller, like the weight of my childhood had shrunk it. Inside, Mom, Dad, Sophie, Aunt Susan, and Cousin Ryan sat in a circle, their faces a mix of pity and accusation. Felt like an intervention, but I was the one they wanted to fix. Mom started, her voice soft but calculated. "Laura, we're worried you're pulling away. Family sticks together." I cut her off, my voice low and steady. "This isn't about pulling away. It's about me saying no. I've given you $50,385 over 6 years. Money I worked myself to the bone for. You left me out of Grandpa's will, and now you're acting like I owe you more." Dad shifted uncomfortably, staring at his hands. Sophie scoffed. "You're so dramatic, Laura. You've got a fancy job in Houston. Why are you making this a big deal?" Her words lit a fire in me. "A big deal," said. "I paid for your car, your rent, your mistakes, Sophie. And you call me an ATM on Instagram. You got $200,000 from Grandpa. I got nothing." Then Mom dropped the real reason for the meeting. "Laura, the mortgage is due tomorrow. $2,100. We thought you'd help one last time." "One last time?" I laughed, a bitter sound I didn't recognize. There is no one last time. You've taken enough. Aunt Susan chimed in. You're being selfish, Laura. Family helps family. That's when I stood up, my voice shaking but clear. You cut me out of Grandpa's inheritance. You used my money to fund Sophie's vacations. This is the inheritance I'm giving myself. I walked out, their stunned silence ringing in my ears. Driving away, I felt like I'd left a piece of myself behind, but it was the piece that kept me chained to their demands. If you've ever walked away from family, knowing it might cost you their love, you understand this moment. It's raw, painful, but it's also power. The fallout was coming and I was ready. The days after the meeting were a storm. Sophie took to Instagram again, posting a tearful video from her Austin apartment. My sister abandoned us, she said, her voice dripping with drama. She's got money, but she's too selfish to help family. The post got hundreds of likes, with comments from distant relatives calling me cold, ungrateful. My phone buzzed with messages from cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, all echoing Sophie's narrative. Mom and Dad didn't call to defend me. They let her story spread. It hurt, but it also clarified something. They'd never change. They'd built their lives on my sacrifices, and now they were punishing me for saying no. But in that darkness, light broke through. Aunt Susan, who'd sided with them at the meeting, called me a week later. Laura, I was wrong, she said. Your mom's been leaning on everyone, not just you. I'm proud of you for standing up. Her words were a lifeline, proof I wasn't crazy. Then Cousin Ryan texted. I saw Sophie's post. She's full of it. I've been through the same with them. You did the right thing. Ryan and I hadn't been close, but his message felt like a hug across the miles. Ethan, my rock, held me as I cried in our Houston apartment. You're not alone, Laura, he said. You're building a new family, one that values you. If you've ever set a boundary and faced backlash, you know this loneliness. But you also know the strength it brings. Sophie's lies, my parents' silence, they couldn't take that away. This wasn't revenge in the petty sense. It was me claiming my worth, my future, my life. Stay with me, because what came next, rebuilding from the ashes, was the sweetest victory of all. 6 months after I walked out of that family meeting in Dallas, my life looks nothing like it did before. I'm Laura Bennett, 35, and I've built something real, something mine. I bought a cozy condo in Austin, Texas, with a view of the city skyline that reminds me every morning I'm free. The walls are painted sage green, my favorite color, and there's a desk where I'm sketching plans for my own accounting firm, one that helps women like me take control of their finances. Ethan, my boyfriend, proposed last month under the Zilker Park oaks, and we're planning a small wedding in the hill country. For the first time, I'm living for me, not my family's demands. My parents, Linda and James, sold their Dallas house and moved to a modest apartment in Fort Worth. They're making it work, though Mom's calls have dwindled to stiff holiday greetings. Sophie, my sister, landed a steady marketing job in Austin, her first real step toward self-reliance. A few weeks ago, she texted me, "Got a raise today. Did it without anyone's help." It's not an apology, but it's progress. I haven't fully forgiven them, but I'm open to a future where we might talk again. Last month, Dad emailed, admitting they leaned on me too hard. "We were wrong, Laura," he wrote. I'm not ready to respond, but I keep the door cracked just in case. I threw a housewarming party in my condo, inviting friends from Austin, Houston, even Oklahoma and Louisiana. We laughed over barbecue and Shiner beers, and I felt a warmth I'd never known with my family. If you've ever cut ties to save yourself, you know this moment, grieving the family you wanted but finding joy in the one you choose. This isn't the end of my story. It's the beginning of one where I'm the priority. This journey taught me that setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's survival. I gave my family over $50,000, believing love meant sacrifice, But all I got was a $550,000 inheritance that went to them and a cruel Instagram post calling me their ATM. Saying no was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was my greatest gift to myself. If you're stuck in a cycle of giving to family at your own expense, listen up. You can break free, and I've got 3 practical tips to help. First, document everything. I kept a spreadsheet of every dollar I gave. $50, $385 total. Seeing that number gave me the clarity to stop. Track every loan, every favor, so you know the truth of what you're giving up. Second, find your support system. Ethan and Dr. Emily Carter, my therapist, gave me the strength to say no. Lean on friends, a counselor, or even online communities who get it. You don't have to face this alone. Third, prioritize your goals. I stopped sending money and bought my condo, started planning my business. Make a list of what you want, a home, a trip, a future, and put that first, no apologies. If you're feeling guilty about setting boundaries, that's normal. You did too. But guilt is a chain they use to keep you giving. You're not abandoning family. You're reclaiming your life. Every time I look out my condo window at Austin's lights, I'm reminded. I chose me, and it was worth it. You can do this too. Start small, but start now. This story isn't just mine. It's for anyone who's felt used by family, who's given everything only to be left empty. If you've been the responsible one, the ATM, the fixer, and you're ready to break free, I'm here to tell you, you're not alone and you're stronger than you know. Share your story in the comments below. Have you set boundaries with family? What was the hardest part? Your words could inspire someone else to take that first step. Hit that like button if this resonated with you, and subscribe to join me on this journey. Ring the bell so you don't miss the next chapter, where I'll share more about building a life on your terms. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Maybe a friend stuck in the same cycle. Together, we can build a community that lifts each other up, where we value ourselves as much as we've been taught to value others. This isn't about revenge, it's